In the last section, we took a look at the API that we're going to use to fetch some images to show on the screen to the user. Anytime we make a request to get an individual image, we get back a little bit of JSON data. So we're going to very quickly look at a Dartpad example and get a better idea of how to work with JSON. I'm going to flip on over to a Dartpad instance. Remember, you can get here by going to dartpad.dartlang.org. Then inside of here, I'm going to immediately create a main function. Now we're not going to actually fetch any data from Dartpad. Dartpad does not allow us to make any HTTP requests. So instead, I'm just going to manually write out a little snippet of JSON. So I'll make a variable called raw JSON. I'll put down a set of single quotes, make sure you have single as well. And then inside of here, I'll put a object. I'll put a double quote for the URL property. Make sure you got double quotes around URL. And then I'll just put some fake URL in there, like http://blah.jpg. And I'll close off the double quote. And then I will give this thing an ID property as well. So I'll put down a comma, another double quote around ID, and then I'll give it an ID of, how about 1? That's reasonable. So notice that I have double quotes around URL, double quotes around the actual URL, double quotes around ID, but then the number right here is an integer, so no quotes around it. All right, so we can kind of imagine that maybe this is some raw JSON data that we have fetched from some remote API. So we need to now parse this JSON into something that we can work with Dart. In order to parse JSON, we're going to import a Dart standard library package called convert. So at the top of the file, I'm going to add in an import statement, and I'll say Dart::convert, like so. So this is another type of import statement. Remember, we've already seen import statements for importing from packages, from files that you and I write, and this is the third type, when we try to import from a Dart standard library. Within this convert package is a function called JSON, or excuse me, not a function, but an object. The JSON object has functions tied to it that allow us to process raw JSON data like this right here. So to take this data and turn it into something that we can actually access inside of Dart, we can write out json.decode, and then we'll pass in that raw JSON. Now when I do that, you possibly will see JSON light up in red right here, and it might say undefined name JSON. That is totally okay. That is because Dartpad is not properly picking up the import statement up here. So if you have your code exactly like mine and you see JSON with the red underline, totally fine, your code is still going to work. This is an error on Dartpad's side, not ours. So we're going to take the result of that function call and assign it to a variable that we'll call parsed JSON, like so. And now we can print parsed JSON, and if we run this example, we will see something like this up here. Now I'm sure that it looks almost identical to what we had before, but it is now inside of a data structure that we call a map. A map in Dart is identical to an object in JavaScript or a hash in Ruby, or maps in Java, of course, as well. So the parsed JSON object right here is a map data structure that has keys of URL and ID, and then a value of this URL right here and the integer 1. To look up values inside of this map object, we can put on square brackets like so, and then in a string, add in the property that we want to look up. So if I want to retrieve the value of the URL key right here, I can enter an URL like so. And now if I run this example, I'll see just the URL get printed out. And of course, we could do the ID as well. And we get back 1. Okay. So that is handling JSON in a nutshell. And there's just one little thing I want to mention here. Remember, when we work with Dart, it is a statically typed language. And wherever possible, we really like to add in types to describe the type of data that we are working with. So in this case, when we parse this JSON data right here, Dart has really no idea what we are getting back. So yeah, Dart's going to know that, sure, it's a map, it contains some amount of information inside of it, but it doesn't really know the different properties and the types of those different property values. So Dart doesn't really know at compile time that URL is going to contain a string and ID is going to contain an integer. So one thing that you and I commonly do as developers is we create what's called a model class to give Dart a better idea of the type of data that's going to come back from our JSON endpoint. Let's take a quick pause right here. We'll come back in the next section and we'll talk about how we can create a model class to contain the JSON data that we just fetched and give Dart a better idea of the type of data that we are working with. So quick break and I'll see you in just a moment.